We're about to show how 3 of these positions win and 3 of these positions lose. Wait, how? We're going to break it down and show you what nuances make each of them work. Right now, you've been on your back foot for the entire match. How do you become world champion? Well, you have to be the best in many match situations. All right, first off, with the E and H pawn, we're going to start out. White's going to try to go after that pawn. Black is going to continue to move forward, get his rook behind his pawns, push forward, and there's nothing White can do to stop him. Instead of back here in this check, if White decides his best try, okay, let me try to stop this pawn here with this rook to h4. After just a little bit of shuffling around, eventually White runs out of moves and Black is able to make progress, and it's only a matter of time. E and H pawn, that's going to be a win for Black. We have F and H pawns, looks really similar. Let's see what happens. White right here cuts off the king natural enough. Black's going to dance around a little bit, and then he's going to work his way back, try to have a rook trade. Right here, if he does step forward, eventually White's able to step here, and Black is forced to give up his pawn if he can't move his pawn forward because this is hanging. And then if he decides to instead, if he decides to just shimmy his king over, then this move right here is gonna remove the defender of that rook. And so he's forced here to give a check, give up a pawn, and we're going into a draw here. Instead of that, let's just say instead of pushing his rook back here, he tries to go behind the pawn. In just a couple of moves, we're moving around, and this rook getting stuck kind of guarding these 2 pawns one turn apart, it ends up that Black just really has no progress anywhere to go. White's eye is going to be able to kind of check along these files right here, and Black, if he moves forward, we're going to run into that same situation. The White king might even be able to move forward here, capturing one of those pawns, and there's just really nothing to do. Black gets completely tied down, and the F and H pawns, those split by 1, that works out to a draw. And then for our last one along the top row, we have the G and H pawn. I think a lot of you know how to handle this situation, but let's play it out. We have Black, he's pushing forward on his advantage. He's taking away squares from the White king. And right here with the 2 pawns here, blocking off, no, not that square, blocking off these 3 squares. Black's looking for a checkmate on the back row. And so White's gonna have to move his rook down here. And after just a couple more moves, Black's gonna be able to promote or able to checkmate the G and H pawns. That's going to be a win for Black. So we know that 2 spaces in between, we're going to be able to get a win. Adjacent, we're going to be able to get a win. Right next to each other, it's a draw. That is only applicable to the side pawns with the H pawn. It's rook games are completely insane. Now let's go along to the bottom row. So far, we've seen 2 wins and we've seen 1 draw. So we know there's going to be 2 more. We've got 2 more wins coming up here. Wait, we've got 2 more draws coming up here. Sorry about that. Let's check it out. Okay, we're continuing around the world here. We're going to the bottom right of your handout, and we're coming up against the E pawn. And so let's see what happens. We've got White. He's going to go check. He's going to keep checking. He's going to keep checking. If Black decides to run away, he's coming right here behind here, and he's going to win that pawn, and we have a draw. There's just nowhere for this there's nowhere for this Black king to hide because the position of the White king is closing off all 3 of these squares, and we're setting up all of these side checks. So let's see what happens when we move the king 1 over and the pawn 1 over. What happens then? Okay, so in this position, we're up against a D pawn, but I don't really want you to think about D pawn, E pawn. I want you to think about short side or long side. We saw that in the last position with the pawn here, that Black was actually on the long side of the pawn. Obviously on the other side of the pawn, it's only 3 squares. This is 4 squares. This is the long side. Now, with the pawn here on the D file, let me use a different color, then the king's actually, right now, this is the 3 squares, and this is the 4 squares. So he's actually on the short side right now. So what does that really mean? That means that the same conditions don't really exist. We don't have the option here for those side checks because we'll go here, and uh-oh, that doesn't really look good. And then if we try to go here, then it really doesn't look good, and black's able to queen. Okay, so we've just seen that side checks don't work. White's got to try a different plan. Well, let's get behind the pawn. It'll make it harder for him to promote. Okay, the rook gives a check. The king obviously is going to get closer to the pawn, but that's not really going to work because if you capture this pawn, then I'm going to check you if you move over here, and if you don't capture the pawn, I'm about to promote. So that doesn't work. Can't go a little bit closer. What if the king goes further away? Then this really slick rook to c6 move. Why rook to c6? Because now the king's going to be able to slide out of the way. There are no checks available, and we'll be able to promote. The king here is just too far away to do anything. So we have our last win. So that means our last position's a draw, but it's not quite that easy. Let's take a look. A rook pawn's always kind of the trickiest to win with. So if you are given an option to, if you're down a pawn and you can, okay, cool, I can get the B pawn, I can get the A pawn, I get the C pawn, you're gonna wanna leave your opponent, generally, there's always exceptions, with the rook pawn available because there's much better drawing chances. What can white do to draw this game? So naturally, okay, cool, let me just cut off the king. We'll kind of go around here a little bit, but we'll see that if that does happen, the black king works his way and tucks his way here into A2, then this is coming, he's gonna work his way around, and he's gonna eventually get himself a queen. So kind of best practice for black, reserve that A2 square for yourself if you can, because a lot of times if white doesn't know how to defend it, then he's gonna run into a lot of trouble. So, okay, cool. So we need to try a different attack. So instead of trying to cut off the king, well, we've got our rook. He's already lined up here on the pawn. Why don't we just, go get him? So, let's try that. So, okay, cool. So we'll get a little bit closer. And, okay, cool. So black, he's decided, okay, I'm going to get rid of my A2 square. Maybe we're making some progress here. Let's go get him. And he's just giving up his pawn. Well, not quite. It's a really common tactic here. The king needs to be able to get back to this G2 or to this H2 square on his next move because of this trick. So black's gonna go here, take the pawn. And so if you aren't able to get back to G2 to defend the H1 square, you're in trouble. So don't go chasing after this pawn. So we know that we can't just quite go all the way after the pawn. We can't just cut off the king. Well, actually, we just saw this in the last position. What if we go after side checks, right? We go after side checks. We can kind of shuffle back and forth for just a minute. The pawn advances. We know that he's 1 square away from getting there to the 7th rank. If we're here, we can't get back in time, so we can't go forward. So it's time to get over to the side of the pawn. So rook A4, king's getting a little bit closer. We don't want to get too far away. And we're going to work our way over here. We're going to be able to stop that pawn. D5, rook here. And unfortunately, we ran into another little trap in rook over here, because on the next move here, he's going to pin the rook to the king. And it's just all sorts of problems yet again. And so even though we know, okay, cool, we need to get to side checks, we have to be really careful how we get to them. So going back here again, one more time, we can't move here. Let's move rook to c3. Let's go about it the right way. We can't fall into those tactics. We get over to the side. We don't want to trade rooks. Our king's too far away. We just kind of mess around, and then we give these repetitive checks, and it is a draw. And you might be wondering, okay, well, all these side checks. Well, what happens if the black king doesn't run over here? Well, if the black king doesn't get all the way over, then it doesn't really matter. All the white king has to do is we're just going to go back and forth until you get tired, and it'll eventually be a draw. Just to recap really quick, if you're black in this position, you got a lot of different resources in order to try to win this game, so go ahead and make white prove to you he knows how to draw this. First off, keep that A2 square reserved for your king. If you're able to get your king all the way over to A2 and white isn't setting up for those side checks, that's going to be great. If the white king starts running after you and gets into this no man's land, can't get back to G2, push all the way to A2. One additional tactic I didn't even mention as I'm thinking about this right now, so let me put a couple of moves here on the board so we're getting a little bit closer. Let's say that white decides here to move to F3, moves up to the 6th rank. That's game over with the pawn here, because this check here and here. So that's another tactic that you can use, is this trick of going to the 6th rank, this trick of the king getting stuck in no man's land on the 7th rank, and then lastly, when the position gets all the way and white does appear to know what's going on, look for tactics to trade off that rook, and if you're able to trade rooks and the king is too far away, you'll be able to promote. And white, just know your tactic to survive this are those side checks, and you have to be really, really careful in how you get that position set up. Okay, so let's get to the main event. We've gone over 6 rook endings, and we are in game 14 of the 2023 World Chess Championship between Ding Liren and Jan Nepomniachtchi. It has been a crazy, crazy match. There's a recap on that coming up here. Stay tuned. It's all tied up. If either player wins this game, then they win the whole entire event. Ding's been coming from behind this whole time. He's always been behind. He's never been ahead in the match. And he's got the white pieces, so he's got something to prove. If he's able to win now with the white pieces, he is world champion. Okay, so the game opens in a Nimzo Indian, and we have a couple trades here. This hook, yeah, put my knight out there, go ahead and take it. Tactics are gonna save me, defend me. We have a bunch of trades. Right here, Ding offers this bishop trade to imbalance his pawns. He wants an imbalance game. He's going for a win. He gives up his G2 pawn because he's trying to fire away here against the black king. This move is awesome. This move is awesome. But as we move forward here, it looks like he's kind of pinned. He's getting a bunch of pressure against him. And we just have this awkward position. Right here, Jan makes a bit of a misstep. The best thing for Jan to do here is to parry Ding's attack. So Ding is coming barreling down this G file. And so a simple G6, what are your rooks doing here on the G file, would have likely ended in a potentially different result for this game, but instead he goes after here and Ding gets in, and this king move, Jan has a ton of pressure, he's defending, and we look right here, and what the heck is Ding even doing? Ding has a rook on H8, he's all tied down here with this bishop, and then this pawn here on B5 is just so weak. What is he going to do to save this game? He was pushing for a win, and now it looks like he's definitely on his back foot. What would you do in this position? Ding finds a really cool, fun continuation. He gives up the pawn, and then what? He gives up the rook? And really what he does here is he trades down. He's down a pawn now, but using a lot of the rook endings that we looked at, and obviously a more simplistic version, he's confident he's able to draw this game. So, okay, so let's play a couple more moves here. What's really happening? Okay, get behind the pawn. That's always a good idea. And Jan, he's trying to push. He's trying to make something happen. He's getting his pawn a lot closer. Ding is waiting. He's not going into the middle there. He's waiting for Jan to decide what to do. Jan gives up one of those pawns. Obviously, that F pawn, it wasn't going to win him the game. He gets back behind the pawn and plays defense. And so now I want to give you just a moment here to figure out, okay, how is Ding supposed to try to save this game? Jan's getting closer. We know that from our A2 position, he's probably going all the way over here, and he's going to make himself a queen. He's going to win the championship. Well, we also know from our other positions that we looked at that if, let's just say, this pawn goes away, and these three pawns go away. Well, this H and E pawn, we know that is going to be a win. That's going to be a win for black. So what does Ding play? He plays F4, because he knows that even if this is taken, and let's say he's able to give up these two white pawns for this one black pawn, he knows that he's going to be able to draw this game. That's how deep his knowledge is. He knows all of the permutations, combinations of all the different rook endings. And in this one, he gives up his pawn. Just like he gave up his pawn a few moves earlier to simplify, he gives up the second pawn. He has two defensive pawn sacks in one game. And so we continue forward. And Jan trying still. And I think he just knows. And with the other thing about this F4 move is it gets Ding to have his own passed E pawn. He has his own counterplay. So it pulls that rook away. We trade. We have that position. We have H and F, but this one's just a little bit easier than the previous position just due to how far away that black king is. And we have a draw. All that being said, it's crazy to me how insane and complicated rook endings can be, and how a player like Ding can conglomerate all of that information into a complicated position and take those mental shortcuts in order to make just a clutch move in the middle of the World Chess Championship, the biggest event of his entire life. And so anyway, what does that mean? That means that the match goes to tie breaks. So stay tuned. There's a full recap on the World Chess Championship coming out shortly. If you haven't seen the Exchange Sacrifice videos, that covers games 2 and 4. But there's a saga coming out to cover all of the other games. Can't wait to share with you guys.